My name is Dylan Lay, and I serve here at First Chinese as the youth and college pastor. If you're a visitor today, we're just glad you're here. Thanks for coming. We love to fellowship with you and just get to know you more. So, get a chance, talk to people. If you see a new face, reach out to them. Don't be afraid. Step out in boldness. That's my encouragement for you. So, today, oh man, Joe got through that. I think it's King James version. Apparently, that was challenging. So I kind of just want to read it again for you through the NIV, so that it could help us better understand as well. So this is Deuteronomy 6. We're going to be in Deuteronomy 6 today. If you have your Bibles or Bible app, verse 4 through 12, it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments I give to you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your homes, of your houses, and on your gates." And in verse 10, "When the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you, a land with large, flourishing cities you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things you did not provide, wells you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves you did not plant. Then when you eat and are satisfied, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery." Um, so, uh, Recently, I went to a wedding just a couple weeks ago, and I haven't been to a wedding for a really long time. And so it was kind of interesting attending one again. And weddings these days they're very ornate, very beautiful. We spend lots of money on them, which is great. But what I really love about weddings is when it comes to the ceremony. And when I think about my own wedding, the ceremony is what stands out the most, where you have a man and a woman coming together in holy union before God, before their friends and family, making a commitment to one another, right? And so in those moments when I see someone else get married, it reminds me of my own wedding and my commitment that I've made to my wife, Tiffany. Um, so it just reminds me, like, man, I need to be a better husband. I need to step my game up. I need to remember this commitment that I made to her, before God as well, that we are to honor God with our marriage. So it just brings back all these memories, and it really uh, burdens me to just continue that commitment. Um, but what's interesting is being married, in any relationship, in a friendship, in a dating relationship, things can get difficult. Uh, there are hard times, there are good times, there are challenges that every relationship has to overcome. And oftentimes, when things get difficult, it's easy to kind of break down and want to run away sometimes. And I remember when Tiff and I dated for like 9 years, something crazy like that. Right? We dated a really long time, and I thought, man, dating 9 years, like, hey, we're doing pretty good here. Like, marriage, that'll be not too bad. But dating and marriage are completely different, I've learned in the past 3 or 4 years. When you're dating, you could be dating and being in a serious relationship for a really long time, but you always have that option. You can always leave, right? You can have one foot in the door and your second foot just hanging out the door a little bit, ready to run away whenever trouble comes. But in marriage, at least in a committed marriage, there's that commitment there where this is lifelong. There's no getting out of this. There's no running away from our problems. If we have a problem, we're going to work it out. And there's no such thing as divorce for Tiff and I, at least. Um, so I don't know if you know, but in the state of Arizona and also Arkansas and Louisiana, there are two different kind of marriage licenses you can get, right? So there's your standard marriage license, pretty normal. The second one is called a covenant marriage license. So your standard marriage license, I guess you could say, if it ever came to a divorce, there is a no fault divorce clause, meaning that if you just want to get a divorce, you can. And you split the assets, whatever, everything's normal. A covenant marriage license is what Tiff and I got. And that kind of has some prerequisites or requirements, if you will. So it names the parties, the man, me, the woman, Tiffany, right? The purpose of a covenant marriage is that marriage is a lifelong commitment, right? Lifelong till death. And it kind of has requirements that initiate premarital counseling. You have to get premarital counseling. And before you even consider divorce, you have to get counseling again before you get a divorce. And it narrows down the limits of divorce or the reasons for divorce, right? It has to be pretty extreme, like, well, I don't want to get into that, but it narrows down the reasons for divorce, right? So essentially, covenant is another word for commitment. It's a contract agreement. So covenant marriage, it's lifelong, right? So today, I want to see what it looks like to be in a covenant with God, what it looks like to be in a commitment with God, what it looks like to be committed to God, obedient to God, if you will. And so that's one thing I want to answer. What does it look like to be in a covenant with God? What does it look like to be committed to God? And I want to ask this question to you as well for the whole church. Where's your relationship with God? I think that's a question that we need to start asking each other more consistently out of genuine love and care for each other. I think often we assume that everyone's doing well. How are you doing? Great. On to the next person. How are you doing? I'm doing great. Everything's good. But really, how are you really doing? How are you really doing in your spiritual life? How are you doing in your relationship with God? So that's what I want to ask you today. That's why I hope that we as a church can reflect on this week, that we as a church can begin asking our children, asking our parents, what's your relationship with God like? Asking our siblings, where are you in your relationship with God? Out of genuine love and concern for them, to encourage them. So today in Deuteronomy 6, we're going to go through that a little bit. I want to give you some background information. This is set in the time of ancient Egypt. And to put it in very simple terms, there is a people group that is chosen by God. They're called the Israelites. They're known as Jews as well. And then God has appointed a leader in their group. His name is Moses. He is a leader, prophet. So here you have Moses, who leads them out of slavery, out of Egypt, because in Egypt they are enslaved as a people group. And so God leads them out of Egypt, and now they're wandering the desert for 40 years, roughly. And now God is saying, okay, stop. I'm ready to give you the land that I promised to your forefathers. And so before that happens, Moses, he's not going to go with them into that land, but he's encouraging them like crazy when they go into this land. What's going to happen? How are they to live life? How are they to honor God? How are they going to live their commitment to God? Being given this land, being provided this land. So I kind of want to test you guys, but this is really to work together. This is going to be a little weird, but with the people next to you, I want you to see if you can recall as a group, maybe 2 or 3 people, the 10 commandments. What are the 10 commandments, right? So with the people next to you, just talk about, it doesn't have to be in order. If you get it in perfect order, that's great. I'm proud of you. But try to recall the 10 commandments if you can. So go ahead and do that now. I'll give you like 2 minutes or so. Oh, don't look it up, by the way. Don't look it up. Have to recall it on memory, okay? Yeah.
I got stuck in that stupid cycle. No, I didn't. We literally pull up on rural. Roll all the way around Mexico. Now you
All right. Who thinks they have it here? Who thinks they have it? Does anyone? Oh, Chris, you're cheating. Okay. All right. Chris has volunteered to go ahead. Sure. Yeah. Paraphrase is fine. Yes. Go ahead. Yes. Let's give it around for Chris. Thanks, Chris. did Did you guys get it? Did you guys get it? So what's kind of funny is right now, JDF, Jeremy, and I, we're all in this Old Testament class together, and we have to memorize the Ten Commandments by heart. So I hope that they got it, or else you are failing. So, okay. So these Ten Commandments, God has given them to His people, and so here Moses is really just driving it home, trying to encourage them. Remember God's commands. Obey God's commands. And he says this over and over again. He's just constantly reminding them. And I think it goes to show a little bit about the human heart. We tend to get distracted. We tend to forget. We forget about God. And so, what is our commitment? That's what I kind of want to look at today. And what is the Israelites? What are the Israelites' commitment to God? So, here in the very first verses, verse 4, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So Moses is addressing them, and it names two parties basically in this covenant, in this commitment. Israel being the recipient of the covenant, and the Lord our God being the initiator of the covenant, right? So you have two parties here. And verse 5, verse 5 is the, the whole entire summary of the commandments. And you've probably heard it before because Jesus quotes it in the New Testament in all the Gospels, right? So here, verse 5, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And when we see the word love, I think love has many connotations to it. Love oftentimes has connotations of emotion, really high highs, really low lows in love. But in the context of this narrative, in the context of this passage, and what Moses has been driving home was obedience. So you could really say, what is love? And love here, I believe, is obedience to God. Um, if you say that you love your spouse, but you don't show them it in action and in care, is that really love? If you say that you love your parents, but you don't obey by the rules and boundaries that they have set for you, is that really loving them? Love here is not rooted in emotion, but it's rooted in obedience to God. So Moses is really trying to encourage them, obey God. Obey God with everything that you have, with all of your being, with just everything about you. And so here, it's kind of interesting that we can love God with everything that we have, but what does that mean? With all of our heart. Oftentimes, we say we love God, but then we go and offend him. We sin against him the next minute. So often we come in here, I'm talking about myself as well. We praise God, but then the next minute we have sinful thoughts or we make sinful actions. Um, So this is all of our heart. Are there parts of our heart that we don't give to God? Are there parts of our lives that we don't give to God, that we aren't obedient to God with, right? For many of us, sexual purity, that's a huge thing. Man, that is devastating to the Christian church. Um, for some of us, it's our finances. Uh, we cling on to what we've earned, what we achieved, and we don't want to give that up. For some of us, it's our past. Dylan, you don't understand how that person hurt me in the past. And some of us, it's the future. So much uncertainty in the future. Our grades, our education, our major, what major we're going to choose, what job are we going to have, how are we going to provide for ourselves, how are we going to be a responsible adult. Are we giving those things to God in obedience? Everything about us, every part of our lives, every aspect of us, every part of our heart that we may want to even hide from Him in shame, right? So that is the whole entire summary of the commandments that you just, all 10 of them, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And so then it goes on. How do you do this? How do you love with everything that you have? And he says, these commands that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. So he's talking about this spectrum of activity when you sit at home, when you're walking along the road. It's in everything that we do. It's in every activity that we participate in. It's in our job, it's in our school, it's in our church life. And it also encompasses all of the time, right? When you lie down, when you're sleeping, when you wake up, when you get up. It's in all things, at all times, are we to have this on our heart, to be obedient to God. And so there are things I think we often compartmentalize in our lives, right? We have our church friends, we have our work friends, we have our family friends. And sometimes it's easier to just keep them where they're at. We do these things with this part of our life, and we do things with this part of our life. It's easier to keep them compartmentalized. But what Moses is saying here is like, it needs to be in everything that you do, in all your activities. The commandments of God are on your heart, on your mind at all times, right? So how do you do it? You do it all the time in everything that you do. Impress them on your children. I have to say this. Okay, as a youth pastor, I have to say this. I'm with your kids like 2 hours out of the week. Man, I really want to encourage parents. Parents, it's really important. I want to empower parents that you guys are the important factor in the lives of your children, in the lives of your grandchildren, whoever, anyone younger than you. Uh, man, it's not, don't leave the spiritual lives of your children up to just the pastor or just the church. But really, my encouragement to parents or grandparents that you are a role model in your child's life, and that you are really the one who's going to drive home what it means to be a Christian. They're going to look at you and they're going to see how you act, how you behave, how you love, and that's what they're going to see as God's love. Right? It's not me. So that's free. All right. I'm just throwing that out there. Okay. So all the time in everything that we do. And here's the next part in verse 8. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and the gates. And that sounds kind of weird for us today, like, oh, am I supposed to put like a cross on my house or something? Or am I supposed to wear something that signifies that I'm a Christian? These are talking about Jewish customs, but modern day, what it's really saying is that set yourself apart from society. Set yourself apart from the world by your obedience to God's commands, right? That's how you set yourself apart. That's how you show people your love for God, that you are of God, that you're obedient to His commands. You're setting yourself apart from the world. When the world says, do whatever you want, whatever makes you happy, love is love, right? So, oh man. But what Moses is trying to say here is set yourself apart from the rest of the world. Because what's happening is in the group that he leads out of Egypt, it's called the mixed multitudes. And what's happening, it's not just Israelites, it's a bunch of different people, and they're worshiping a bunch of different gods in that group, but they're all coming out together. So when they come out, there's different pagan worship. And so he's saying that set yourself apart from that group, set yourself apart from all the other nomadic groups that you may encounter along the road as well. So, how do you love God with everything that you have? It's in everything that you do all the time. And it's also setting yourself apart by your obedience. And here in verse 10, we go along here. When the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to you, to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, to give you a land with large, flourishing cities you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things you did not provide, wells you did not dig, the vineyards and olive groves you did not plant. Then when you eat and are satisfied, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. So this is what's happening. They're fleeing from the Egyptians, and they're about to go into this land. This land is called Canaan. It belongs to another people group called the Canaanites. And what he's saying is, I'm going to give you this land, but you have to drive out the inhabitants that are already there. But when you drive them out, you're not going to destroy the city because you're going to end up living there. And I'm blessing you in this way because the cities are already built. The wells are already dug. The food has been already planted for you to harvest. So I'm giving you not only the land, but the land that it's already built up for you to live in. So all these things that they have, they don't belong to them. They didn't really work for them. In our lives, in the light of God's provision for us, in the light of Stewardship Month, everything that we have honestly does not belong to us. It is provided from God. And there are so many times when just tithing alone is, we've learned, is a pretty difficult situation sometimes. The standard is whatever, 10% of your income. But there are times where you're like, man, that 10%, I could have that in my pocket, and it would be so much better if I paid off extra on my mortgage. I could pay off my mortgage quicker in 15 years, and I would save so much in interest, right? There are all these things. So when it comes to things that we have, things that belong to us, they're not really ours to begin with, right? When we think of our education, our medical licenses, our accounting practice, our degrees that we've earned, do they really belong to us? They are from God, and we are to never forget that. So Moses is challenging them here. You're going to get all these things. God's going to bless you, yes. But don't forget who gave it to you and what he's done for you. Don't forget your commitment to God. Don't forget that you are to be obedient to God. So today, I want to kind of just look at the things that we have. At our house, we have this junk drawer. I think everybody has a junk drawer, right? You don't know what to do with this stuff, so you put it in this drawer for whatever reason, in case you need it. I don't know, spare parts, right? But then it becomes a junk closet, and then maybe like a junk room, and then it starts piling up in your garage. Like, we need to store this stuff. These are memories, right? And then it starts flowing out your garage, and you need to go rent a storage unit. And so we have all this stuff. In America, we have tons of stuff that we hoard. Honestly, some of us are hoarders. So we have all this stuff. These things, I believe, we build up things on this earth. We build up education. We build up degrees. Nothing's wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with building up a 401k or your pension and things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. But what happens is when we get comfortable in our security. Moses is saying that here to the Israelites. You have all this stuff. God's providing. He's blessing you like crazy. You have all these things, but don't get comfortable. Don't get so caught up in your security that you forget about who gave it to you and what you're called to do. Called to be obedient to God and his commands, right? We get super comfortable when we have all the right stuff, but what happens when you start losing some of that stuff? When the economy tanks and you lose your job, when the stock market crashes and you lose your savings, your investments, your portfolio, what happens when your health is degrading? When you start losing stuff, you realize that you are more dependent on God than you ever were, right? You start crying out to God. I think we've all been there at some point in our lives, and if not, it's coming. So don't forget about God with all these things. We get comfortable and complacent. And for many of us, we've been coming to this church, or we've been going to church for years and years, decades, 10, 20, 30 years. How are you in your relationship with God? Right? What is your commitment to God? Is something that I want to reflect on. We want to reflect on as a church. So just as the Israelites were given all this stuff by God, they really weren't deserving of it to begin with, right? They were disobedient to God left and right all the time. Israel, the name in itself, means to wrestle with God, always wrestling with God. They are disobedient. And I am so reminded that that is us. That is me. That is Dylan. That I'm disobedient to God. We are disobedient to God. But still, he's chasing after us, right? And so in this passage, it's the Old Testament. It's the old covenant, if you will. It's the old commitment that God has given to the Israelites. But later on, we have a New Testament, a new covenant in the blood of Christ, right? So even though at our very worst, at our most disobedient, God is still blessing us and trying to run after us with this relentless love that he has. He's constantly giving us paths to himself, an opportunity to be reconciled to him. And it's just, even with all our sin, that he sends Jesus to pay for all those things. That he wants to be in a relationship with us. And he's asking that all you have to do is make a commitment to give your life to me. So as we go this week, Thanksgiving, we're going to be thankful for like a minute and then go shopping afterwards. So, but really, I want us to think about as a church, where are we in our relationship with God? Because when it comes to stewardship of God's provision, it really starts with the heart. It really starts with where is your heart and where is your commitment to God? Because we have to talk about that first before we go into, all right, you need to give 10% or whatever. You need to give your time and energy, things like that. But out of genuine care and concern, where are you? Where are you in your relationship, in your commitment? That commitment that you made long ago to give your life to Christ. And maybe you're sitting here and you've been coming to this church for a couple months now, and you're kind of on the fence, and I've been there as well. I've been on the fence where it's, I'm going to church, I know who God is, but I haven't really made that commitment to him because I'm kind of scared, honestly, what that might mean. I want to encourage you, if that's you, that making that commitment is going to change your life. It's not going to be some kind of magical transformation overnight, but man, God is going to take hold of you. He's going to take hold of your heart, and he's going to transform you. And it'll be an amazing thing to see. So with that, let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, we're just so thankful to be here as a family together to worship you, Lord, this week. God, we're so thankful for everything that you're doing in our lives, God. You have given us as a church so much. You've given us as families so much. You've always provided in different ways. Even when we didn't think it was possible, God, you came and you just showed us your love for us in different aspects of our lives when we didn't even see it coming, Lord. That was so amazing to see. And God, I pray that as we grow and as we just go about our day in everything that we do at all times, Lord, we would remember what it means to be committed to you, what it means to be obedient to you and your commands. God, that we wouldn't forget or get comfortable in our security, Lord, in our comfort, that we would always be reminded of who you are, your love for us, and everything that you've done. God, I pray that we would encourage one another, that we would really ask how each one of us is doing, out of genuine care and concern and love for each other, Lord, that we would point each other towards you, keeping each other accountable of our commitment to you. God, we just thank you and we love you. Praise things in Jesus' name.
How deep the Father's love